Back in April, Brock's Digital Scholarship Lab began collecting data about communication in the Niagara region during the COVID-19 pandemic. Acting head of the Digital Scholarship Lab, Tim Rebaric, joins the source. Tim, I know this is still ongoing, but what have you found thus far?
It's very interesting. We saw a lot of changes in the way people were communicating COVID restrictions and alerts and news about pandemic, during the pandemic, I should say. And we saw a lot of, a large volume of information suddenly show up, and it was really almost as if there was too much, and people were sort of scaling back from that point, which was particularly interesting. Another trend or phenomenon we saw recently is that some organizations have started to take down their COVID-19 sort of informational pages already, which is a bit curious, as you know, I dare to say we're kind of in the last lengths of it, but it's still, you know, pretty present. So it's interesting to see the uptake of the information, and then it drops off, and now it's just sort of slowly disappearing.
From April to today, do you see changes in the themes? Were things more like a warning about some of the dangers and then sort of easing off on that?
We applied some algorithms to the text to determine the sentiment that they were expressing, so how emotional they were versus how objective they were. And we saw over a period of time that the material is quite subjective. A lot of it wasn't just a statement of fact. It was actually sort of imploring people to do certain things or act in particular ways. It was a very interesting trend. We'll see how it all pans out. There's about 3 million documents in the archive, so it's a little bit to parse through, but that's a general trend we're seeing right now at this point.
Tim, we hear a lot about the anti-vaxxers and the people who just don't believe in the COVID-19 pandemic as being a reality. Are you finding statistics that show how much data is being sent out there from those kinds of people?
Well, our collection of data focuses primarily on media organizations and different municipalities and community organizations. So it's not particularly based on, or we're not particularly collecting just thoughts and expressions of random people that might be making some comments about the pandemic online. So I'm happy to report that most of the information we've analyzed and the details we've come across so far are pretty level-headed, and none of the organizations in the Niagara region were, pushing towards, pandemic denialism or anything along those lines.
When you look at these organizations, did they tend to speak in one voice, or was it all over the map?
Oh, that's a good one. We're still trying to get to the bottom of what that means, but it definitely, there are shades of, let's get the information out there and worry about, the refinement afterwards. So it's interesting to see that, people were just trying to keep up with what was going on, but not necessarily in a very strategic, singular voice at all times.
Were a lot of these organizations also spreading information that the other organizations had already put out there, retweeting, reposting?
Yeah, particularly you can see when someone like the Government of Canada or the Government of Ontario places something on one of their web pages, it sort of cascades quite quickly into other to the web content of other organizations. So you can kind of see this trickle down effect, which was pretty interesting because it just goes to show that there wasn't a ton of information all the time, and what was there did get recycled and shared and passed on. So it was good to see that there was a good link of communication between all those organizations, that's for sure.
Tim, as I mentioned off the top, this study is ongoing. How much longer will you be collecting data, and when will we see the results of the study?
Yeah, great question. I think we're going to, at around the end of this year, we'll stop collecting and then sit on or analyze what we have, and at that point be able to make our conclusions. And we're going to write up our final results, hopefully for publication in the spring. So, we won't be quite out of the woods yet, but I think we'll be able to cover at least the deployment of, vaccines to 5 to 11-year-olds. And I think that'll be sort of the last milestone that we capture. And then we'll take a look at it all together and start writing up our results.
Students are involved in this with you as well?
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple of research assistants. They're both students in computer science. They're doing a really great job for us analyzing the data. So we're looking at, as I mentioned, 3 million or so web pages. That comes out to a few hundred gigabytes of data, and developing algorithms and ways to search through that is where the big challenge is, because you got to look for multiple needles in multiple haystacks, really.